I'm Chris Thompson, and you're listening to the Mega Talks podcast. All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. Today's guest is revisiting me from back in episode 12. His name is Brian Wilson. He's owner of Force Martial Arts out of Russellville. Today we're going to talk about some origins of jiu-jitsu, and we go into some other subjects about a little bit about government and some things about COVID and some historic topics as well. So lend your ear here and enjoy the Mega Talks podcast. What's going on, everybody? This is Christopher Thompson. I'm here with Brian Wilson on Mega Talks. Today we're talking about jiu-jitsu, if you're not surprised enough about that. But anyway, I've been waiting to have Brian on the show. Had him on once before, but we didn't talk just a lot of jiu-jitsu. But how's it going today, Brian?
Dude, it's great, man. I appreciate you having me back on the show.
Cool. We was talking a little bit about guitar before we got started here, but kind of changing the subject into jiu-jitsu. And basically, we get here in the U.S., it's always been commonly being called Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I've had students come into my gym, which I own a gym. Brian owns the gym. We're affiliated together. And I get a lot of people talk about, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And they'll ask me, what is Brazilian jiu-jitsu? And I'm like, basically, it's jiu-jitsu. But the jiu-jitsu I know is probably different than the jiu-jitsu that was created several centuries or however many years ago. That's what I wanted to talk to Brian about. Just where did jiu-jitsu, where's the foundation? Where did it originate?
Okay, so I will say this. So sort of a dead end that I ran into in like the earliest research, so like origins of the art, would be a lot of people say, well, jiu-jitsu came over from India to Japan, right? That being like the earliest inception. Like if we're going to origins of the art, like where does the term jiu-jitsu even come from and stuff like that, right? So like that's chapter one of my master's thesis in college. So, but I could never find any evidence in my research of like, oh, hey, here is the, kind of like the Maeda type story for the India connection. I could never find that. Like Renzo Gracie mentions that in his book. It's co-authored by John Danaher, Mastering Jiu-Jitsu. Mm-hmm. And you notice different spellings on it, right? Like J-U, J-I-T-S-U. That's more the westernized spelling of the Japanese art. So when you see that, but the Japanese spelling, like pre-1882, which would be the samurai art. So if you're talking like the event when Japan started to westernize, is called the Meiji Restoration, right? It's when they opened up in the 1800s. Now, judo invented in 1882. Meiji Restoration occurs before that. But you have from like samurai, 800s AD or CE, Common Era, however you want to say it, until that restoration period, that was jujutsu, J-U-T. J-U-J-U-T-S-U. So like you got to kind of get into the linguistics of it. Like, so I can be reading, and if they're talking about a certain time period, I'm like, it depends on what you're reading and who you're reading, because a lot of people that like, I know people in, that I see make statuses and stuff on social media. They can't even spell the westernized spelling, like J-I-U. J-I-T-S-U.
And that's the way I see it spelled most of the time.
Yeah, yes. And so if we're talking jiu-jitsu in the West or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right, that's the spelling. If you're talking pre-restoration, jiu-jitsu is the spelling. So like weeping style, like Mr. Dream does, like that's going to be the spelling, J-U, J-U-T-S-U. And if it's sort of westernized Japanese jiu-jitsu, like stuff that's occurring in our time or a little bit before, you're going to see it J-U-J-I-T-S-U. So like, and you can kind of, if you see people talking about it now and you see them kind of maybe talking about older style jiu-jitsu and they aren't spelling it J-U-J-U-T-S-U, I'm like, okay, maybe you haven't, because that's just like, man, in the approach I took with categorizing the history and also that's kind of the model. That's what people have already done. That's how it's already kind of laid out,
Yeah. And when, as far as the art, taking place when jiu-jitsu was started, wasn't it they encompassed on the feet and the ground and more than just...
Yes. Not only that, let me see. I think I got a book here I cited my master's thesis on. Let me see if I've got it right here on the shelf. Yes. Okay. So not only that, like it encompassed like a lot of martial arts. So if we're talking like Japanese jiu-jitsu from pre-Meiji Japan, so like the samurai art, that's going to be sword, bow. So you have bojutsu, jojutsu, jujutsu, and all of these different specialty kenjutsu, like if it's a sword. So like it just kind of depended, like anything that a samurai would engage in terms of warfare. And then you would have like certain clans, which their warriors would specialize in different weapons, just like you see with, I think, different styles of Filipino martial arts, and even different styles of karate. They focus on different weapon specialties. So you see it being the armed and the unarmed approach in like that 18 or that 700s, 800s, all the way to the 1800s, right? Mm-hmm. It's once you have the invention of the gun and gunpowder cannons, that makes a major shift. That's 1500s, right?
Yeah.
And then you see some of the focus on the weapons start to dwindle out. And this was Jigoro Kano's thesis who invented judo. It's kind of like our rich culture we had for so long and how awesome jiu-jitsu was with all these weapons, everything. We're losing that. I'm going to recodify that as judo, right? Mm-hmm. So then it goes judo. All right, we're going to proliferate this everywhere. There's a picture of Kano training in Kodokan Judo book, training the German army in 1933, right? It's, so he proliferated it everywhere. That's like Maeda was coming with Yamashita to the United States in 1905 doing demonstrations and like throwing these cadets from West Point with like Tomonagi's. And because the judoka went first, the paper went down first, you know what I'm saying? The papers read cadets down the Jap. Totally racist. But you have the gentleman's agreement in the United States right after that in 1907. And that is what pushes Japanese migration and a colony in Brazil. And that is what takes Maeda to Brazil, right? And I think he migrated to Brazil in 1911, if I'm not mistaken. I had to look that up.
And their judo during that time was just... Was it all throws, or did it include the ground stuff too?
Okay, I would say somebody that I know a fair amount about this, but I would say who knows probably even a little bit more than me is Steve Gorley, because he has kind of like nailed that. Yeah, he knows a lot about Japanese jiu-jitsu and judo, but he can kind of nail down like, hey, here's when the neck breaks were taken out, and I will say. Like in Japan, when they started to make moves to codify judo in the early 1900s with the Budokai is what it was called, they removed a lot of stuff, right? Like certain throws were taken out. I've got some older judo books that have obscure throws or variations of common throws, or they just said like it would be something like, hey, here's one throw, but we do it 22 different ways. With all these different, So a lot of that gets lost. But man, yeah, judo, according to my research, was from 1882 until the codification, it becoming like a PE, a physical education based approach in Japan. I think that is when it started to shift away from being as diverse as it was from Kano's original thesis of, hey, we want to re-encapsulate the samurai art with this art, And if you look into it, there was a rift between Kano school of thought, and then also between the Japanese jiu-jitsu at the time, of which there was like over 2,000 different schools, right? So he was like basically saying, hey, this is watered down and it's dying, and we've got to do something on a national level to fix that, right? But and then he shifted that to like, hey, he was an internationalist, right? He's like, let's push it everywhere, and it did go everywhere, you know. And then it morphed into, because what you have when that happens is like somebody sees that, and they want to be like, that's awesome. Well, let's change it, or let's call it our own for their own sort of nationalistic purposes. And that's when that's why, I mean, why would you throw a country name in front of an art?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for nationalist purposes. So like, that's like with me, I just call it jiu-jitsu to pay homage to according to my research, the country of origin, which would be Japan. Right. But it's like, yes, I have a black belt and you and I both practice and have for years Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But honestly, like that's they wanted to claim superiority, and several times, like judo attempted to reach out to the Gracies and like, hey, we really think you have good judo. How about you stop calling it what you're calling it and accept these judo black belts, you know?
Yeah.
We want, and I think part of that, man, in my research was like the fact that, yes, Maeda was a high level judo guy and a great martial artist, but he had more of a, you know how there's like a rift or a divide between like,
just like gyms or training facilities and different opinions.
But martial artists and fighters, right? And I'm not saying that Maeda was not a martial artist, but I'm saying like he did rack up some people not being too happy with his. You know how like you get to a certain point in your ranking up where it's like, hey, what are your contributions to the arts? You know, I feel like that was places that he was kind of frowned upon. Like, hey, you know, you're fighting for money a little too much, because man, he fought all over the place. Oh yeah. You know, but that's that to each their own. Like, I kind of get the gist with that, and that he may have been a little bit more of a like.
Opportunist,
yes. Now, I'm not saying like Conor McGregor, but like or even an early version, like some cocky prick or something. But more like, hey, martial arts is how I make my living doing these things. I mean,
that's like the next question I was going to ask you. Is like, what made him want to migrate from where he was and why did he choose like the area of Brazil?
You know, I'm not 100% sure on that, man, but I was about to say, like, I do need to do my master's thesis kind of stopped like right where I started, stopped talking, and it went into some other areas. Like the Cold War was the main focus for me. And I need to, when I expand upon this in the future, like I've got goals to, really expand on my master's thesis. And that is something, it's like, I just kind of saved for the end, because it was like jiu-jitsu, just like being an art that I like really study. I kind of did all the early background research, set myself up to like basically get to Brazil, and then just kind of stopped it there. But I also talked about like, man, it's interesting, this nationalism approach, right? So like that is a big thesis for me, is like Taekwondo in Korea, Wushu in China, and then the dichotomy between martial arts and Western societies that are liberal democratic based and like Eastern totalitarian societies, right? And like how the purpose of, you know, how they're being used. But with this, you know, with jiu-jitsu, fortunately, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, there's been a lot of really good stuff come out the last few years. The books Shoque, and I might be pronouncing that wrong, Choque, multi-volumes there, great sources. And then also, man, I'm looking forward to this research project that Robert Drysdale has been putting together. And I hope that I've got some contact info on him, and I'm friends with him on Facebook. I'm trying to have him on the podcast to talk about some of this stuff.
I think Johnny had him on.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I wasn't able to catch all the podcasts, but I caught like highlights because like during this COVID time, like everything's online, and I'm like, man, I've got online overload. I've got so much stuff to absorb.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, what year did you say Maeda was in Brazil? What year was that?
I believe it's 1911. Let me look it up.
So about what year do you think, like as far as the U.S. migration, when martial arts started showing up in what we call Western America, what years do you think that was?
In terms of Japanese arts, you start seeing that like right at the turn of the century, right at 1900.
It wasn't that prevalent.
In places first, do what?
It wasn't that prevalent in 1900s. It must have been like, because when any history class or anything that you study or films that you watch, it's almost non-existent unless it's specifically a martial arts film.
I will say and this is a very interesting little video. You see Kennedy going to Fort Bragg, maybe in 1962. I'm not 100% sure, but the Green Berets, the earlier like formation of special forces that they're training, and they're essentially doing judo. And that's one thing. Okay, hold on a second. Maeda migrated to Brazil in 1914 to establish a Japanese immigration colony in northern Brazil, where he befriended Gustavo Gracie, an influential businessman. So, no. But what were you saying before that? I said 1911 is 1914. So, yeah, right at the outbreak of World War I.
Yeah, we were talking about 62 Fort Bragg with Kennedy.
Yeah, well, you see, so from that time, so like 1905, I believe, or 1904 was one of the first jiu-jitsu demos in the United States. Jiu-jitsu was taught at our Naval Academy. And you see that, but then you see also, like, if you look into this gentleman's agreement, that is like there was increased Japanese migration to the United States, right? Mm-hmm. And Teddy Roosevelt's kind of like, hey, we're just going to that's not going to happen anymore, right? So this causes the Japanese to shift their colonization efforts to Brazil, right?
Okay.
So, yeah. Interesting.
It's kind of like Mexico and Filipino. Well, yeah, kind of the same, but I mean, not for the same reasons. I know Inosano talked about that as far as like Mexico and Filipino were in exchange of like actually prisoners, prisoners of the time or something. They exchanged each other and cultures became kind of like a crossover. He never did mention martial arts.
Interesting stuff is the cross-cultural ties, That's the stuff that fascinates me is like, how did that? That's why I really would like to find more stuff on the India connection is like, but it's just, it's not there in my research. Like I see a lot of people mention it, but I'm like, where's your source? Because I've got some old Japanese sources that I can cite. So, it's like the Kojiki no Kata, or what is that called? Hold on. I might have just told you a judo kata. Hold on. I believe there's some of the early Japanese histories are out there. I think Kojiki is one of them. Let's see. Kojiki, early Japanese Chronicle of Myths. Yes. I wonder if that's also a judo kata name.
So judo has kata?
Oh, yeah. Judo has 10 katas.
I didn't know that.
I don't think the very last kata, I can't remember the name of it, but it's something like that. It's got some cool throws in it.
Mm-hmm. So, and he knew the ground stuff. He pretty much knew it all. But, the stories I've heard were like all the arts got separated in Brazil, I guess, like from judo to jiu-jitsu, and then they separated upper body and lower body. Does that have any?
Yeah, I think that went on, and then like Drysdale's making some claims that like the Fada lineage didn't even train with Maeda. And, their early bag, if I remember correctly, is that they were like into footlocks. Right. So that's another interesting thing. So like, that's another division within like what you're talking about. It's like, and I think a lot of that has to do with rules. Like you look at even like Helio Gracie's early fights. It's like, yes, you're in a fight, but you aren't punching each other in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was that. So, and then you also have like the evolution into Valley Tudo where it is, violent, bare knuckle MMA basically.
And I wish I could remember where, I'd seen that because, you follow martial arts as a kid, and I remember people taking other people down with their feet, but I didn't know exactly, what was going on. But I just wish I could remember where I first seen that stuff from. And
I think about that a lot, and I think a lot of it is Hollywood, man. Like, there's so many people that have never been on the mats that have an idea of like some key throws or trips, for example, like the Osoto Gari type throw, or the Seyanagi, the shoulder throw. Like, but where do they get that? Where do they get that idea of using those concepts? Is it inherently ingrained on some level? That is like an interesting concept to me,
Yeah. I never thought about that, the transition there.
Yeah, because like myself included, it's like I was homeschooled as a kid, but I remember the first martial arts seminar I went to a couple months after I started training with this Brazilian dude named Paulo. And it was like all these throws like Tomanagi and Seyanagi and like shooting for a double and then tripping them with the outside leg. It was like all these things that were like so vaguely familiar to me on some level. So, and I'm like 19 years old. So does that mean that I just like seen all that shit on TV and Walker, Texas Ranger or, and like had an idea of it in my head. So it wasn't the first time I thought about, it's just interesting that some things like that, you do have an idea of them, even the untrained person.
And that's, I guess that's like what they talk about, fighting's in the DNA. Maybe it's in there a little bit more than we know.
Yeah, because we're talking thousands of years of
or maybe it has something to do with
like
your family ancestry. Maybe you have some ancestors that come from around there. It's just built in. You have that instinct, that sixth sense, I guess you say.
If we believe any of the models of prehistory, then human beings have been fighting just back against everything for thousands of years. I mean, there's a lot of evidence and records of ancient martial arts in Egypt, right? So you take a look at Africa being the cradle of civilization, as a lot of people call it, for a lot of different culture, a lot of different ideas. I would argue that's even where we see a lot of the earliest martial arts, but we see it in all societies. Like
a lot of warriors.
Yes, yeah. Right. So it's like is a form of national defense, is a form of self-defense. It's just really interesting that it occurs so much. Like there's an early form of stick fighting in ancient Egypt with papyrus stalks that I would say is like they weren't, according to my research, weren't in contact with the Philippines, but doing real similar looking stuff in terms of like, oh, hey, they're both basically double stick fighting with a similar length staff. And Asano makes these points a lot. He's like, he points out like, hey, look at this martial art over here. during this time, and look at this martial art, like completely uninfluenced by each other ever in all of history. Like they're doing the same trapping drill. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
You know,
that is weird. Have you ever heard of the, kind of off topic, have you ever heard of the Moors or the Moors?
Oh, bro, I just watched, I've been watching all the Quentin Tarantino movies.
Uh-huh.
Right? Have you seen True Romance?
I don't think so.
Okay, so let me recap this. Yes, I know about the Moors. But this Sicilian dude comes in and he's going to rough up Dennis Hopper. He's like looking for his kid. And he's like, "Yo, I'm Sicilian. I can tell when people are lying." And Dennis Hopper's character is like, "Well, you know, the Moors came and they raped all the Sicilians and changed the genetic background. So like, you're really, you know, you're part African." So, cause like the guy was like being racist or something, but I was just like, damn. But he's like, he goes into this big history on the Moors. He's like, "Oh, I'm kind of a history buff, you know." But yeah, it was super fun. I just watched that the other day. So that kind of reminded me of that.
I didn't know about that. I had to watch that.
Yeah, well, you know, that movie, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner, that Morgan Freeman's character in that movie is a Moor.
Oh, okay.
Right, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, classic film.
Yeah, I just knew they were like a European group of warriors that I think that's where they originated in Africa. And some European, and they migrated over to, I think Mexico, like Mayans or something. Or I don't know that much.
Man, South American history. There's a guy, and he's a mentor of mine. He's nearing retirement, but he's a South American historian, and I've been wanting to have him on the podcast, and I hope that I can, either have him zoom in or something soon, talk with him, because he, and the South American stuff that I've kind of picked up to look into from Graham Hancock is fascinating. I mean, like there's another guy that one of the girls from the gym just turned me on to as well that talks about a lot of the same stuff, but like, basically getting into the accounts of like what the Spanish and Portuguese ran into when they first arrived to South America, like really breaking down those accounts and like how they were like running into certain types of food that had to be processed with another type of something like ayahuasca, for example, in theory, but not that plant. But you know how like ayahuasca, you can't make the brew with just the one leaf, right? It has to be made with these two different things. So like there's just like some sort of a fruit or something that they were eating, right? And it was like almost killing them because they weren't preparing it correctly. It had to be processed with a certain, a certain other plant for your stomach to absorb it.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It is. Coming off we kind of got it off on a tangent with the Moors. As far as like Maida and Brazil, and you got the intertwining with the Gracies, where do we see the Brazilian push, like the morph towards America? What we know today is like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and why do we call it? What's the difference between a Brazilian and just a regular jiu-jitsu?
I would say two events there. Event one would be the Gracies actually coming to America, right? And then the Gracies proliferating the art and competing throughout. Whether that's if you want to start, I wouldn't say like Julio Gracie fighting in Brazil in the 50s. I wouldn't say that. I would say his son starting to fight and nephews starting to fight in the 70s, starting to add to the art. And then by the time you get the 80s, you start to get more migration into North America from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, particularly the Gracies. And then you get Jordan Gracie in the UFC. And it's like, then, like everybody I've talked to, I've been asking a real stereotypical question on all my jiu-jitsu podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
So how'd you get into training jiu-jitsu? All right, well, UFC 1 came out, bro. And when I saw it, it's always that. It's always like people know the date. And it's like, so then you go from there to ESPN and you get people walking out being like, this dude's a purple belt, or John Jones is a blue belt, or whatever. It's like, that's like, so now it's like something that you see their rank in that art on ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
So from early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, when you start to get the diffusion in America to presently, right? That's the big morph. And that's why I wanted to wait on a lot of this, because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, everything we're talking about can be a chapter easily, and the approach I'm wanting to make with a future book.
Yeah, because it's pretty broad.
But also modern MMA being the United States piece, because it's always like what have we talked about? Like, well, maybe it went from India to Japan, but then it went from Japan to everywhere, and then when it went to this one place, they changed it, and then it became this, and then when it went from here to there, that's when it became this, being MMA in the United States, right? So it's like, that is what I think the explosion of that, like hybridized with, like, if I was doing like an MMA chapter, I would start with Bruce Lee. Like, not like he's the first guy, but like Maeda too. It's like they wanted to blend these ideas together. So they wanted to mix what in Hento Gracie's book they call phases of combat, right?
Yeah,
like they're like. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say they were innovating things. They were like creating. They weren't just like practicing. They were like creating, like with the art. They were still painting a picture.
Yeah, and man, I just think too, Chris, is like this is, dude, we're such little whiny babies about I was thinking about this the other day, like my phone is being weird. It was like, you don't have a SIM card. And I was like, I have a SIM card. I don't even know how to take it out. But like, I couldn't make any calls or anything. I was being a child about it. Like, being upset about it. And I was just like, dude, you couldn't even like you got to wait on like a shipwrecked sailor from another country that knows martial arts techniques that you don't 150 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And now it's like, I'm pissed off that my YouTube video won't load so I can see what Gray Jackson's saying on this seminar. It's like, but now like just, that's what has led to the diffusion is like technological innovation. Like people, I think I never see anybody that was, like I try and think about this way. Like if you were over 25 when the internet was invented, you probably look at things oddly.
Yeah.
In relation to like the internet is a truly valuable resource. Like my dad is just figuring out like how like to buy and sell on the internet and how convenient it is. It's like changing his whole life. Like I'm sitting here talking to you on my AirPods. Like he's got these hearing aids that are essentially AirPods. He's like, I was like, dude, Dad, check these out. And he's like, dude, I've been doing this. Okay. I got the same technology in my ear.
Yeah.
But like it's the rapid ability for me to be able to like, hey, let's do a podcast and pull up all these videos of like black and white martial arts videos, the earliest. It's like, we can do that. Yes. We can do that from early 1900s all the way to present. But what about the time when that was not a thing and it was scrolls and Mao Zedong destroyed all of them? You know what I'm saying? Or martial arts masters were rounded up and executed. Like that's happened. So, and there are no videos. There is no archive. There is no, it being somewhat of just this word of mouth oral tradition in many ways for many years. It's like, I just think about it pre-technology and post-technology in a lot of ways, and pre-gunpowder and post-gunpowder, because that's like through technological innovations, you've seen martial arts change drastically.
See, and I wonder about that. Us using video and passing techniques around, and everybody learns, and you see guys coming up with different types of techniques, and you're like, wow, that's new. I've never thought about that or tried that before. But I always think about, like, what are the chances that it's been done before?
Oh, so high, dude. That's why I don't even. I refer to things as like this. Either, like I said, that's something on that video I just put out this week. I said the person who instilled this in me.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
right. Because, and I mean, I was talking about Jack, but it's like, you know, and then I'd probably tell you like, okay, Hickson instilled that in him. But so there's that, but it's like within Asano's thesis, it's like, hey, you get these two countries on opposite sides of the world doing the same thing. It's super, and I mean, like Japan is interesting because they were so isolationist, right? So isolation, and then, martial art being, your country's martial art being connected to nationalism. You remember when GSP got Canadian Athlete of the Year and fought in Montreal and all that? Yeah. It's like that was their national pride through sports. So like sports nationalism, right? But like it doesn't have to be a sport either. It could be like Japan's the warrior culture, the warrior aristocracy,
Yeah. And that's another thing I think about as far as like sport and reality, because a lot of people, they talk about sport and they say, well, this is the closest thing to realism that you're going to get. And, when I hear that, I just think it like, it only like touches the surface as far as like jujitsu. It's like being real, because you take all joint manipulation or small joint manipulation, eye pokes, fish hooks, or a lot of things that you take out, the Aikido in certain areas that's just missing. So it's still just only a percentage of what realism could be. Oh
yeah, totally agree, dude. Big time.
Because the last class that I was teaching right before this stuff, I was and I meant to teach it, is just like we're talking about side control and some escapes from underneath, and I forgot to mention like fish hooking to clear space.
Dude, what did I just? Oh, I was watching Django Unchained last night.
Oh yeah, that's a good movie.
And the scene when the two guys are fighting, when Schultz and Django first meet Leonardo DiCaprio, he fish hooks him to roll him over. Yeah. Ryan Erickson, one of our guys, got fish hooked in a fight by Justin Pfizer.
Really?
Asshole. Yeah.
I wonder if it was purposely done.
Sitting there, oh yeah, big time for sure. Ref was standing there staring at it too. It's like, hey, dude, this dude's not.
Did he let him have the position?
Well, it was like, okay, so here's how it was. It was like Ryan kept high crotching him. He high crotched him several times, like slamming. It's like he high crotch slammed somebody in the 4 fights I cornered him for, every round of all 4 of those fights. And that being the fourth one, and the one he finished, he would high cross. So he had Pfizer pinned up against the cage and was trying to lift him, and he went around his head and like fist hooked him.
Oh shoot!
Yeah, yeah, foul.
Yeah, especially standing. That's pretty vicious. It's one thing on the ground, because you can kind of have a little better fight, because you have a lot more base when you're standing up.
Yeah, it's a rough situation that is only there by virtue of there being a wall.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could be single, like high crotch out in the open with like the knee pinch and stuff, but.
And it's stuff like that a lot of people don't think of. And when it comes to self-defense, I'm like, you got to have a force multiplier, or you've got to go to that extra dirty and know what you're doing with the rest of your like standardized techniques. You've got to be able to go beyond that. Because if you meet somebody else that's just trained and they're just like, their perspective of attack or defense is just a tunnel, you've got to think outside the tunnel to leverage a situation. You can't know the same standard stuff. Like,
oh yeah, dude, think about like eye pokes.
Yeah,
like that being such a prominent thing in MMA that's come up over the last year. Like, but any foul in MMA, that's a great. Like, I got this from John Ackelman at a seminar a couple years ago in Vegas. But he was just like, yeah, fouls. That's self-defense, fouls. You train the fouls, right? So he's like, Glover Teixeira, who just fought, he was there, and he had been poked in the eye by, I think, Gustafson, and it had injured his eye, and he couldn't drive for like 2 weeks.
Shoot.
And he's like, ask this dude about fouls. He's like, and he's like, he got poked, he couldn't drive for 2 weeks. Imagine how bad that hurt while he's fighting that person.
Yeah.
But that's just it. And he's like, he was talking about some things, you're not getting drawn out of your element. But a lot of people want to hate on that, dude. Like, here's the thing, man. Here's one thing that I see a lot of jiu-jitsu dudes hating on. I train it weekly, not defense, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm not doing anything super elaborate, but especially with Roland, who's been coming in, Dr. Shang, we train knife defense every time he comes in. I've learned a lot of great knife defense from Dring. Woods and I both did this in our classes a while back. We had like 7-8 people there, threw like 5 knives out in the center, and we were like, go. Right? Like, because, they're team grappling rounds, like, to mix it up, but like a lot of sport jiu-jitsu stylists will never think that way.
No. And that was one of the things that I was wanting to do, like, this year, is incorporate a lot of different style trainings in our classes like that, to change perspective and to improve technique in certain areas, is to, like, get into things like that. One's got a weapon, you got to take the weapon, or you got to avoid the weapon, and things like being just blindfolded. And one's blindfolded, maybe the other one's not, or maybe they're both blindfolded. Yeah, for sure, dude. I did some blindfolded rolling with Josh Bishop the other day. Yeah.
And then, what? Did you listen to the Daniel O'Brien episode?
No, I didn't. I heard part of it, but I didn't get to the end of it.
Well, he talks a little bit about. I asked him about that grappling tournament that he entered in blindfolded, right? But then he went into this big story about how he was training blindfolded for like 2 or 3 months, and how he had like at the rules meeting, he was just like, look, I've been training like this. I haven't even rolled with my eyes open and this long. Is it okay with everybody if I enter blindfolded? But dude, those are great methods. And like, why can't we have it all? Like, why can't we do gi and no gi? Why can't we do all the leg locks? Why, like, that's just like, and I have been dogmatically the other side of a lot of things due to spheres of influence or whatever. But it's like, at the end of the day, if we're going to be good self-defense proliferators, teach people martial arts and how to defend themselves, we're going to teach our individual arts, but we're also going to do all this other stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. And evolve over time. I'll tell you, dude, have you ever done very much like Kali grappling, like stick grappling or Filipino style, like takedowns? Eric Paulson's showing some sick takedowns out of this little break with sticks into like Kimuras or chokes on the ground. Yeah.
I've kind of dabbled with the stick formations. You know how you use your legs to you can use your legs in conjunction with the hands to like do judo throws and things like that. I've experimented with stuff like that, but it's not like open hand technique. I guess because sometimes when I get into class or something, I'm just in the jiu-jitsu mindset. I'm not in the Kali mindset, but I've done that with my stand-up. Like if I'm kickboxing or we're just sparring or something, I'll block with my lead leg and fight from a closed distance, and it takes away the back half of their strikes or their spinning strikes, and they actually usually back off because they're just not comfortable from being there, because you're just taught this toe-to-toe style fight. So when I actually close the space, and it's
man, that's I love training with weapons. Like a lot of people like single double stick, knife, bow and Joe staff, kendo, like, and having Dr. Shane come in. Like that is I don't even usually describe things in this way, but that's a blessing, right? Like, because like the dude is a master. Like I'm here to tell you, like on the feet, but he has insane striking too. But it's not like he's not like a Western boxer. But the dude's a Wing Chun master. He is a 6th Dan in judo. He is a 3rd Dan in Aikido. And I don't know if I don't think he holds rank in Taekwondo, but he knows all 10 of the katas, and he did, or the first 10 katas for like the black belt, I guess, you know, but he did 10 katas, and he did them both with double swords and empty hand. And I was just like,
he probably knows the back 10 too, if he knows the front like that.
Well, yeah, so I'm like, and he's like, here's the first one. Give me both those swords. Here's the first one, both the swords. Like, but man, he knows so much. So like the 31 Joe Kata from Aikido. He knows this one kata from Aikido that he's taught me. He's like showed me a Filipino double sword kata the other day. Like it could have been. I've seen it. I've seen this similar thing done, and he used like Filipino terms like abanico, and he is from the Philippines. It's where he went to med school, but he is Chinese. So it's interesting. Cool. He's like 72 years old. Just comes in, blows my freaking mind every time he's there.
And he's probably doing it with ease.
Oh yeah. What was funny is like he came in, it's like, and he still does, but like just came in and started doing jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu class. Right. But over time, like I saw him working the Wing Chun dummy. Right. And I went over and I was just watching her, and I like asked him some stupid question like, what are you doing there? You know, or something. And he's like, oh, you know, this is this last kata that man came up with before he died. I do it every day in my mind, empty hand and on the dummy, you know? And I'm just like, oh my God. But he's taught me this kata. I still can't do it all the way through. It's over 100 moves long.
Oh yeah.
On the wooden dummy.
Like when he learned all that stuff, did he take notes on those things?
I don't know if he did at one point. He does keep notes on his phone. He shares them with me and sends me links. And I've filmed a lot of our stuff that we've done. Like, as a matter of fact, that double sword kata, I'll text it to you right now. I filmed that last time we worked the other day.
True. That's nice.
He did. And I've worked a little bit of like the Joe stuff he does with Nate. He's shown me the Katami Waza. From Aikido, like the wrist and pinning techniques. But the guy he's a true martial arts master.
Yeah.
So
because guys like that, there's no separation in the art. It's all one cohesive art when you start putting it together.
He says that like he has some staple sayings, it's all the same, just exercise. Like he views what we're doing as a like wellness practice. You know what I'm saying? And then he's like, when you get into like what we've talked about, like we've been to all the places, like different arts and like the same art at different times and different places. It's like, he's just like, yes, I've been through all that too. And you know what? I'm here to tell you, it's all the same.
Yeah.
It all comes down to like that model, like Greg Jackson or that Renzo Gracie book follows, of like phases of fighting, like striking. You could go striking to clinch. You could go striking to takedown. You could go striking to more striking. You know, you could go clinch. All right, you go clinch back to striking. Or you could go clinch to takedown. You know, and then just grappling. And you all the little hierarchical models and conceptual models. We come up with all that, and just like, they're infinite. You could chain them together infinitely. So I think that like that is. I mean, I've only been doing this since 2006, right? But like my humble opinion so far is like what is that? Like 13 years, right? Yeah. Is that is maybe the development of the black belt mindset that, you know, not everything is this segmented like we think. That we should maybe just think about it as like I was saying earlier, dude, like I don't think about myself as a jiu-jitsu guy. I think about myself as a martial artist.
Yeah, that's the way I see it.
Right, or like some fighters crossover a lot of times. Yeah, exactly. They do, right? But like fighters a lot of times don't think about themselves, I think, or carry themselves like a martial artist, if that makes sense. Like, I think that they're different things. I think even within that, like, you get a martial artist being an elitist also, like, Chris, my style of jiu-jitsu is better than your style. Right? Like you get that all the time, man. And I'm guilty of doing stuff like that in the past too. And it's just like, on the other side of that, having gone through all these arts and done all this study and research on the history side, and that's kind of where I've arrived.
Yeah, and I get that from people like starting in Taekwondo. A lot of people say you can't do nothing with Taekwondo, and it's all about jiu-jitsu. And some people are like, the dominant art is jiu-jitsu, and others are like, no, the dominant art is Muay Thai. And I'm like, there's no dominant art. It's just the dominant you. It's like, what art is best fits like your style? That's what's best for you. Like, there's no dominant art that like Muay Thai is guaranteed to beat jiu-jitsu, or jiu-jitsu is guaranteed to beat Muay Thai. But if one's more proficient than the other, there's going to be the winner.
Yeah, exactly. The dominant art is the one that wins at the time.
Yeah,
is my take.
Because that's you want to have the warrior's mindset or the warrior's mentality. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be whatever gets you to the point of domination, or whatever gets you to the win. It doesn't matter what the art is. It's what you can do.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree, dude. Like, and I kind of think that, like, my limited study with the Japanese stuff and the samurai arts and like because, dude, the number of different arts, and like Daniel Bryan is talking about all the weapons that his karate style studies, I think he's called it Kobudo, but it was like the boat paddle and some things like that. But I think that the samurai styles, that like when you just segment all of them, it's like they were really like, hey, if this happens, they had all these strategies for when they would auxiliary into the different styles or the different subsets. And then like when I worked with Dr. Shang, right, he's just like, oh, we're going to do this same technique, empty hand against the punch. Then we're going to do it against the knife. Then we're going to do it against a staff. Then we're going to do it against the sword. And it's like, not everything he teaches is like that, or he'll teach us throw. And he's like, we're going to throw somebody when they try and hit us or use this weapon against us. So, and that's it. But you get a lot of crossover, because it's not like every little weapon against empty hand or weapon on weapon are all different techniques. It's like, dude, I hit you on the same angles with almost any weapon I wield with my hand.
Yeah.
Except a gun.
And even sometimes that'll work.
Yeah, if we're talking a nice fencer's lunge, right? It's the same angle.
Yeah. That's what happens when we get two martial artists talking. I kind of forgot where I was going on the jiu-jitsu thing. But what do you think about the people that what is his name? They make claims of American jiu-jitsu. It's different from what was known as Brazilian jiu-jitsu. They come over just because they incorporate all the submissions. And I think that's the reasoning for it. I think it's Keenan Cornelius that talks about American jiu-jitsu.
I've heard Saulo Ribeiro talk about that too, right? Okay. And I think that's two things. I think, one, that's a potential nationalistic trap for us to fall into, because we want to put the country in front of it again.
Yeah.
Because of the contributions and innovations made by Americans, right? And I get that. That's one part of it.
And my question is, but are they innovations? But keep going.
Well, yeah, exactly. More like discoveries. Yeah. Rediscoveries. Reinventions. Like, that was the name, the title of my master's thesis was the reinvention of tradition. Mm-hmm. That's really what we're talking about. Yeah. But here's what I would say is that, to our knowledge, it is and has evolved. It is evolving and has evolved. Mm-hmm. Maybe it is devolved and re-evolved. Right? In terms of like for example, Kano would argue Japanese jiu-jitsu devolved over time. And that's what people would say, like, oh, it got watered down.
Yeah.
You know? And like that can happen. And I think that like why that happened in Japan and why Kano was saying that is because there were like 2,000 different schools and styles of like, well, this is this town's take on jiu-jitsu. And it was like, but they were Japan was isolationist, so that's like all there was, right? So, and it was a very important part of their culture. My dog is digging out of her pen here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
You have an escape artist.
She did, dude. She got out earlier because there was a turtle.
That's the Labrador, right? Ain't it?
She is part Pyrenees.
Oh.
Yeah, I see where she got. She had this turtle in her mouth, and like we got the turtle from her, and then she was trying to. We didn't know how she got out, but now she's trying to get back up to go find that turtle again. Sorry about that. Come on, Gracie. Yeah, I got my own Joe Rogan's version of it. Yeah, he has Marshall Rogan. I got Gracie. I got Hickson and Gracie. That's my dog's name.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. All right, we're good. Yeah, but man, I think that I think what we're talking about is like martial arts in evolutionary terms, and then the continual reinvention of a tradition, and laying claims to said tradition, right? Like everybody, I feel this way with history. I was talking to Jeff Woods about this the other day. It's like when you get onto some good history that really interests you, even though you have never been around it, never heard it, just like when I train with Jack and he shows me something I feel like I should have always known. It's like you get excited about it. You want to contribute to it. You want to be a part of it. You want to write about it. You want to film videos, whatever it is. And I feel like that's a trap people fall into. And like I've been doing all this kind of like research about a couple of vlog topics I'm going to do along these lines for our not for our YouTube channel, but like about like people lying about their training time and shit like that.
Oh yeah, I saw where you was talking about that.
Yeah, interesting. That's something I've always encountered. Always.
And I think that has to do with we talk about reinventing and all that, and some people, you know, and this one question I didn't get a chance to ask you, but like when people get rank in their art, and when Maeda come over, you know, do they have a ranking system? And some people, you know, they don't want to get involved into a ranking system, and they have strict opinions about like, you know, training time versus a ranking system. And some people they just don't want to be ranked, and others they want to rank, and they get into this mindset that, you know, the art is just specifically about the rank. And I don't know if that has anything to do with people, I don't know, lying about their training time, or they just want to have these, I don't know, these fabrications of I've been training for 15 years, but you only perform like a 5-year-old or a 5-year-old trainer, not like a 5-year-old person, but you only train like you've been in the art for less than 5 years, not 15 or so.
Yeah, exactly, man. And that's a great point. I think you commented that on one of those posts I made, right? It was like, it's or like the gist of that. But the responses I got on that were super varied, right? Yeah. And I think that's why, like, hey, yeah, we're doing judo, but we're not going to call it judo because we do these techniques a little differently. We're going to call it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
And dude, we're seeing that go full circle again with like, well, you know, is it really Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? And what's funny is that we're like open to the conversation, right? Like, oh, well, you know, maybe it is America Jiu-Jitsu, right? Yeah. And I, you know, but it's like, if we're going to be real about it, since we don't have that India connection I was talking to you about, this shit is all Japanese jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Well, jiu-jitsu is a Japanese word. Like you're like, why put another country name in a different language in front of a word from this country and then be like, we're not doing Japanese. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like that's kind of it's a weird, that's a weird arrangement.
Yeah. And what does jitsu mean?
Gentle skill.
Okay.
Skill is one translation. That's like Kano on the do term. Do means way, loosely, right? Like one of the interpretations. It's like gentle way, like accepting someone's aggression and turning it into your technique. Whereas like the gentle skill, like it refers to the skill in all things, whether that's weapons or empty hand or throwing or fighting with armor on or fighting with a sword or whatever.
Yeah, because I noticed they changed the word in front and keep the jitsu at the end.
Exactly. Yeah. So skill. I've heard it translated a lot of things, but skill is the most common, right? And I want to say do. I've heard also translated into yielding or pliancy as well in Japanese, right? The way of yielding or the way of pliancy.
Because you have the name. Yeah, because you have the name dojo also, and I think of that as almost like two words as opposed to one word, but you see it spelled out as one.
Yeah, and man, so like on the jutsu term, like skill or technique. So like this is another model that I think a lot about is like you see, and Joe Louis, the kickboxer, had a saying, tactics or techniques become strategies. Tactics become strategies. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that Kano kind of had it right based on my research that Japanese jiu-jitsu had become watered down and he wanted to do something about that. And his whole thesis on like judo, we're going to change it from a tactic to a principle. Right. Like everything in judo that I've studied. I'm not saying that the Japanese jiu-jitsu doesn't have these underlying principles. I can't speak to that. I only have limited exposure to Japanese jiu-jitsu in like one style out of 2,000, plus. So I can't, but like, I will say like I've had a fair amount of exposure to Aikido. And that being said, like, I think that Aikido is and judo together, if you really get intensely into both of them, that they are both very close to Japanese jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's what I think is interesting when I'm on the ground with somebody, because I think of some Aikido, and I'm thinking, well, I'm probably not going to do that to this person because they don't know anything about it.
Well,
so we're just going to stick with like the teaching the lessons, what we have in front of us.
See, I'm not trying to confuse people. And I wonder if it does sometimes. Like when I teach, I'm like, oh, it's a Russian 2-on-1. It's called Kokinagi in Aikido. It's, people call it this over here in Jiu-Jitsu. The catch wrestlers call it that. I think I found a lot of value personally in learning techniques and learning where the terms come from, the history of the terms, the history of the technique, and how different, like, that synthesis, man. That's what you want. Like I keep saying the word thesis, like of this, like, hey, this is my central idea, my argument for this bigger picture significance here. Well, like a synthesis is like, I'm taking a bunch of different theses and, I'm deriving from that.
Yeah. That's cool. Cause I see that, as far as like multiple arts combined into one, it's just a train of thought. And it's one way I know that you teach and I teach is like, I teach everything. Like white belts come in and they learn just as much as like the upper belts, and there's no separation in what you're going to learn. The only separation is your proficiency. But if I teach, based on a rule set, why am I doing that? If it's truly self-defense, I'm not going to pick a rule set and teach under that and tell a white belt you can only do this because of rules. You need to know how to defend yourself just as much as, the next person. But I call, like, when we were talking about martial artists versus just like, I guess, jiu-jitsu practitioner or fighter, there's the difference. Because martial artists would be able to adapt their technique to a rule set and perform, either good or bad, depending on their opponent. But they should be able to adjust. I think they should be able to adjust. Not because I've had people say, "Well, I can only do this because when the rules change, I feel like I'm gonna break the rules just out of habit." I'm like,
yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that.
Yeah. And I'm like, you need to be able to do both. I mean, I don't know. But it's like when, you're a police officer, you have a flow, a continuum, a force continuum that you follow. You have to have certain control and abilities and, recognize which area that you're in and which area that you need to be in. It's just not all free for all. And a martial artist should be able to, like, distinguish between your levels of attack. You should have a soft level, hard level, and like panic, extreme level. That's just the way I feel, though. I don't know about you.
Well, no, I do. Like, and I like, Dring was kind of commenting this on this video Eric shared, but like Hickson's point of view on techniques is like, hey, here's the technique. Now I'm going to squeeze the shit out of you. Now make it work.
Yeah.
And we get into, like, a lot of times that is frowned on in a lot of gyms and drilling jiu-jitsu techniques. It's like, hey, let him get the technique. And it's like, maybe. Okay, I'll let him get it. And then after he has it, let's see if he can get it.
Uh-huh.
So that's like, I tested a bunch of my guys who were doing a sweep the other day, and I was just like, you don't do this, I'll do this or that. You got to do this, or it's not going to work right. And I'll stand up while you're trying to mount me, and that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, I tested a couple of them out, and a couple of them had it, a couple of them didn't have it, but it's like, I was resisting,
I think that's one of the hardest things to do, because I do that to my students. I'll be like, you can only do this and you can only do that. And a lot of times they won't be able to do it, and it'll frustrate them. And I'm like, they already know the game. I said, but how many other people out there, are you going to try and do one thing too, and they already know that game? And you don't have like 2 or 3 different techniques to do the same thing. You don't have 2 or 3 ways of performing your move.
Well, and that's why I did. I think that, like, okay, so let's take all of this, like, application to, like, these other styles that these other people have invented, and then just, like, switch that to, like, the individual's journey.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, really, like, everybody I talk to at a high level that has already gone through all this is like, it becomes your own individual art.
Yeah.
It becomes not this country's style or that country's style or this master's ideas or that master's idea. It becomes like, you looked at this differently than anybody, so this is how you interpreted it, and that's different than anybody else, right? You're going to have some differences, even like, oh yeah, right, yeah, Chris does a side kick, everybody does a side kick. Well, Chris does a side kick a little differently on these instances over here.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how he learned it, because he's a unique individual. Like, I think that, like, we don't talk about that enough in terms of, like we do, but, like, people don't pay enough knowledge to it or acknowledge it enough. Like with Hickson, like, that dude looks at jiu-jitsu differently than most people,
mm-hmm.
right? And it's not a negative thing. I think that I'm like, wow, his interpretation of this is truly unique. Wow.
Yeah.
Some people hate on that,
because he can take the most, what's complicated to some and just simplify it to like 2 different foundations, and you're like, okay, those are the 2 most important, and that's what I need to focus on.
Did you get to train with Hickson in Vegas at that seminar I went to? Were you there that year?
No, I saw your training, and then you done some stuff to me when we were rolling that I use in every situation now.
Oh man, I've done 3 private lessons with Jack since the quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like all Hicks and stuff. We actually did all guard stuff, and we started side mount escapes yesterday. So, but I was telling Jack yesterday, I had down like how many privates, how many seminars, et cetera, I'd done with Jack. But now, like, I can't even keep track of that. Like, it's because I've learned so much stuff from the dude that it's starting to all blend together in a positive way.
Well,
it's good. Like I've been in training with Hickson a couple of times too. It's been super beneficial. I want to train with him again, so I can keep expanding that narrative. Like, there's certain things that Jack's taught me that, like, at least 2 techniques recently that I added to in a big way by going back through it. Right. So that's, it's been nice.
Yeah. Because there's just, people boil it down to like, well, I know this technique and that technique. If you get me here, I'm going to know how to do this. But some of the things that involves him is like, you may know the technique, but you're not going to be able to move. And that's one of the things that confused me when we were rolling. And I'm like, I can't move. I can only go this way. But I can see the move and I know it's there, but I just can't move that way. That was one of the most mind blowing, and at the time it was frustrating because I knew I should be able to go there, just didn't know why. But I do that to people now, and they can't figure it out. I'm like, I don't have to be strong. I just need to like stop you right here. I don't have to be heavy to do it. But you figure it out later.
Yeah. Man, it is just, I've been talking about this a lot, and it gets super heady. Like, people talk about, I have a very similar approach as like John Donaher. It's like, I'm a professor, bro. I'm gonna educate you on the mat about all of these things. But I've been thinking about jiu-jitsu empirically, right? Like, empiricism is like the observation of the natural universe. Well, like, think about jiu-jitsu in that way, like observation of jiu-jitsu, observation of your jiu-jitsu, observation of others' jiu-jitsu, observation of past jiu-jitsu, observation of present jiu-jitsu. Like, there's so many ways that we could observe jiu-jitsu around us in the gym. Like, what's like, people don't like watching people roll a lot, or like a whole lot of people won't watch. They say jiu-jitsu is not a spectator-friendly sport, like stuff like that. It's like, but that's how exactly right. But it's even for like people I know that are ardent practitioners. They become passive learners when they're watching jiu-jitsu videos and stuff. They're just like, well, it's hard for me to pay attention for 20 minutes while Gordon's fighting Buchecha or whatever, Yeah. And I get that. It is, but like, we've been breaking down the Donaher Ashley Grami system. It's dense, dude. You got to watch it multiple times. You got to take notes. You got to critically think about what you're learning, and these are things that people like, they don't want to do, like empiricism, observation of the natural universe. Like, hey, there's a universe, go observe it, learn some shit, and then report back. It's like, that's jiu-jitsu. Like, but a lot of people aren't reporting back.
Yeah, I think I put a post up or made a comment somewhere about if jiu-jitsu, if you had to, when you signed up for jiu-jitsu, what if you had to go through a terminology phase where you never hit the mats for like a whole month or maybe 2 months until you like learn terminologies and just recognize positions of pictures and things like that. And people were saying, "Oh, there's no way I trained jiu-jitsu then."
And I don't think consumers in the United States would, or maybe anywhere. I don't know, no. Unless it's like it was given to them in a public education manner. And that's a great way of thinking about jiu-jitsu in terms of education. That's what we need more of.
Yeah.
But like, that's just why we, like I mentioned this earlier, like people who were like full ass grown adults when the internet came out, they typically had this dim view of digital content, and I've never understood it because, like, here's my view: it is our responsibility to provide every student with the stuff that you just talked about, and there's no time frame on providing. We need to provide it to everybody all the time.
Yeah,
right. And that's why I continue. We're almost 700 videos on our YouTube channel now. But that's a 2.5 year effort or something like that. Mm-hmm. But when I started recording videos, like midway through my brown belt for our YouTube channel, like I had people around me try to these other people who were older after the internet, trying to discourage me from doing it.
Yeah.
You know, and what sense does that make when it's like, the point you just hit is like, man, we really need to like provide did you see the mind maps I put out the other day?
Yeah. And I looked at some of those, and I was thinking about that classroom stuff when I looked at those. I'm like, some people are going to look at that and be like, I can't learn all this. I just want to do it.
Well, but that's it. That's what's so now we have over half a dozen advanced jiu-jitsu classes. Mm-hmm. So we do advanced no-gi with that class 3 times a week. We have 4 open mats a week. So it occurs right after class. We roll situation in class, flow into open mat. But on Thursdays, we do the situational rolling in no-gi, or it's no rolling. Like that's a dense class and topic, lots of drilling. But in there, when we do roll, it's going to be situational to get the leg attacks.
Mm-hmm. So we do that where usually on our Wednesdays class, we'll do some situational and then we'll go into like a free roll afterward. But a lot of times I'll have scenarios that I'll set up, and sometimes they can be like those scenarios I told you about. They're kind of, I don't know, they're kind of singular. You can only do one thing and the other person knows what you're trying to do and they're just trying to kill it. But that, I feel like that makes you better in the area, but you don't have the element of surprise, you know, when you're trying to do them. So a lot of people get frustrated with that, but I'm like, you know, you got to battle through the emotion. It's not so much as technique as it is, it's going to be a mental side to it also. You have to be able to focus and, you know, be mentally strong, not just get frustrated and give up.
Yeah. That is, I think if we do everything we're supposed to do, I will say this, like, I think that this shutdown situation has pushed a lot of gyms in a short amount of time to bridge their digital divide. Mm-hmm. Right.
It definitely boosted mine, because before it was just kind of like come and go, you know, just kind of when you want it to. And now it's like, well, I'm in a schedule and I'm in a groove, and, you know, I'm going to keep this going.
And that's key, man. Like, other than till like when we were moving, like when we first started moving, and now I'm getting back on track, but like having a time every week where I recorded footage, mm-hmm. And like getting back in the groove of that now and starting to put videos out every week is, it's pivotal, because, man, it engages my students. Everything I'm putting out or showing is, you know, relevant to what's going on the mats in our classes in one way or another. Mm-hmm. And it just helps them with retention. It can help them boost their confidence, not feel stupid, learn the technique faster, whatever it is. If it's like, that's why I've been posting all my notes to our groups too, whether that be the instructor group or the member group. It's like, hey, here's a PDF of my notes on the 10th planet warm-ups. I bolded all the 10th planet specific terms.
Oh,
Here
yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
You know, so, or the Donna, hey, here's my volume 1 leg lock notes. I also made these mind maps. And in our closed group, like the instructor group, I even shared the video. And then I make the videos that I purchased through the gym available to all our assistants. And we do an assistant instructor training every Sunday morning. Like, that's pivotal. Nice. That's all pivotal.
Yeah. Because that's, you know, just, I used to not put out, I would just put out like videos every now and then, and not like on a schedule or anything like that. But for a while I was thinking that, you know, why am I putting a video of a Kimura or a hip bump sweep out when there's 10 million already on the internet? And enough, you know, it took me some time to like evolve and realize that they want to see me do it. They don't want to see 10 other people do it.
Well, and that's just it too. Like we've mentioned a couple of times, the evolution. Like, you know, the more videos you do, like when I do videos and watch videos, and like I liked what Eric posted earlier because he was actually getting dialogue going about ways to do videos. And that's another thing is you can get in a habit of just doing the same video format every time. And like, man, even with my podcast, like I want all my shit to be varied. I want, like, I've done some voiceovers. I've done about a dozen or so voiceovers. I've done drilling videos with music in the back. Not all videos I put out are just like, hey, here's how you do it. But a lot of them, you fall into that stereotypical jiu-jitsu video or whatever you're doing, striking. It's like that everybody does. But then it comes in, it's like what you're saying. I'm like, well, it's your content, it's your art, it's your interpretation, it's how you explain it, your metaphors, your analogies. Yeah, that's what makes it special. And
I think that's what makes it. You know, for your students, you know, they like to see that. You know, they don't want to see you repeat the same thing somebody else done or pretend to be somebody else, or because like I took some online stuff from Miguel over the break. You know, he had some Zoom classes I took from him, and then, you know, it was simple stuff that I already knew, but it was like it was a new way and a different way of doing it, and some other things that I could pass on and things that helped me just like perform the technique so much better. It's just a couple of things that you add in there, you know, and a couple of things that I'd seen people do before and didn't understand it. So I switched to, I'm not going to say a better way, but I switched to a way that worked for me primarily, you know, that I pass along to others. Because I always tell people you're going to learn it like this. You're going to learn steps 1 through 7. I said, but those steps are going to become your steps. I said, you may see me do it like this, but you're going to find a way that works for you, and you're going to start doing it like that. But this is like your basis, your foundation to work from. If you understand it, you should have some level of proficiency, and then you'll meet somebody that blows it out of the water, and you'll rethink life.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, well, like, man, you got it. What kind of you got any other podcasts you got scheduled coming up on your show or anything?
No, I don't have any schedule. It was like when the COVID stuff hit. I've been trying to get a few people on the podcast, and they didn't have time. And now the stuff hit, and everybody's like, there's a lot of digital stuff. So I just been keeping with my same schedule because I don't want to like change the schedule and flood people with material. But, you know, I try and my focus was to do like 2 a month or once a month when I first started. So I just kind of keep with that.
Yeah. That's, man, I've been on the grind doing, I just really love podcasting. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like listening to podcasts just as much. And I see the people and hear them talk, and I'm like, man, I'd like to have them on, but I don't want to get people on and talk about the same stuff they talked about. Because I know some are you're gonna talk about the same thing. A lot of
people on, exactly. Like I know, and I pull other people for questions. That's one thing I've been doing. I'm like people I know that know the person. I'm like, hey, I'm about to have this person on. Like, you want me to ask him anything?
Oh yeah.
And, you know, and they'll be like, yeah, that person's into this or something. Like, there's a guitar player I'm trying to have on that played like a summer tour with Widespread Panic between their guitar players and was their original guitar player's technician. His name's Sam Holt. But like, for example, like here's a talking point. I mean, maybe he talks to everybody about it, but this dude doesn't play with a pick and only uses his thumb, and he's a cheese grater of a guitar player, dude. Just like melts your face off. Just like, oh my God, dude, he shreds. But how does he shred like that with his thumb?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to say all that to him just like that.
Uh-huh.
And I'll say it to him in a way ain't nobody ever said it to him.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what makes a podcast unique. Is like, Joe Rogan is like the best interviewer maybe in the world.
Oh, you think so?
I do. I think it comes down, and that's like just like having done, I'm getting close to 150 episodes now of total podcast, and over 2 years.
I like the way he has guests in, and you think that they're going to talk about something specific just because maybe he brings a race car driver in, and that's all they're going to talk about is that. But it's usually just the opposite. They talk about everything but that before they come and talk about their profession, and you get to see a different side of them. Now some of those interviews I hadn't done yet because I just hadn't done them. But it would be weird for us to come in and talk about, like, me and you just come in and talk about, like, well, this is the television set, and they're like, y'all are jiu-jitsu and martial arts guys. We don't want to hear this.
That's why, Joe, I've been doing a flux of jiu-jitsu and MMA shows just like for extra content for the gym members, partially because I only did like 3 Zoom jiu-jitsu classes, and we're back in swinging our adults, but I'm still sharing them and still doing them because honestly, I'll say just because like what audiences I'm plugged in with, those are my biggest viewership on Facebook, for example. It's from the martial arts community. I've like most of the martial arts episodes I've done have got 1,000+ views on Facebook.
Yeah, that's good.
But it's because of the people I'm having on. They share it, and it's like all jiu-jitsu guys are like whatever,
And I like how some of the people are more open to doing the interviews now, as opposed to from before, because they have the time to do it, or they just they see others doing it and they're not afraid to do it. But when I started my podcast, there was people, I had a list of people that I went through that I knew I wanted on the podcast. And I was surprised at some of the people that just didn't want to do it because they were afraid and they didn't have the confidence they didn't think they were an important enough product to be on a podcast. Even if it was a small podcast, they weren't comfortable with it. And I was like, man, I would never expected that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's super. And I've run into that a time or two. I've run into people who are like, I don't have time. I've run into people who were nervous about it.
Yeah.
But man, overall, like I've only had just a couple of guests that like I couldn't coordinate with, like almost everybody I've reached out to. And that's another thing too, is like, man, like, people all over the country. I know people all over the country. And then, too, like, there's people all over the country that we don't know that are also willing to talk with us.
Yeah.
And I just think it's all the approach, like, because, too, I want to, like, when I hit up this guitar tech that I wanted to podcast with him, it's like, hey, here's who I am. I'm a college professor. I'm a huge fan of this body of work that you've been associated with. I teach history. I'm probably going to write on these topics someday. It's a great material, honestly. And it's like I own a martial arts school with my wife, second largest academy in my state. We're both in the South. And I have a podcast. And because honestly, like for me, it's all the same. Like I said to somebody yesterday, my podcast, like just like a natural progression of everything I've ever done.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that's like, I try and divide up all the episodes and shit. So I'm not flooding like the normal audience. Like I do a Life Unraveled episode. I'm really not going to talk about jiu-jitsu a lot, but there's no promises.
It's kind of hard that it doesn't come up.
Because that's who I am, man.
Yeah.
It's just like people like, well, it's interesting to me now that Joe Rogan's podcast has so many fans. And I have gotten over 10 responses of people. You sign up a new member at the gym. They're like, hey, how'd you hear about us? Or how'd you hear about jiu-jitsu? And they're like, Joe Rogan's podcast, he fucking talks about it all the time. Right? Isn't it too? It's funny. Like I just said the F word on your podcast. So apologies. But I it's a bad word whenever I say it all the time. But somebody was going to say shit or something on my podcast the other day, and they're like, "Oh, can I swear?"
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like that happens all the time. I was like, "You're a grown ass adult. Of course you can swear."
Yeah, that happened with my last guest. He was like, he didn't want to, say something foul. I was like, oh, you can say anything you want. He's like, okay, I'm good.
Like there's certain words that I don't prefer people say on there, like, the R word, or I don't want to be insensitive to large demographics of people in any way, but like, I don't care, dude. I'm not like, what am I, the thought police? I'm gonna, don't say that word.
You can adjust for, I don't know, people have different standards on different types of things, and what's contradictory or hypocritical for some is just okay with them. And it's like, that doesn't even have a pattern. Shoot, I lost my word on that one. It doesn't have a pattern of acceptance.
Yeah. Dude, that's another thing I noticed too. Like, having podcasted for as many hours as I have in life now over the last couple of years. I mean, because several 3-hour episodes, sometimes 2 or 3 people a day, or 3 a week or 5 a week, and then all the interactions I have at the gym at home. But dude, sometimes you just straight lose your ass in a conversation.
Yeah.
And it's embarrassing, but like, the more you talk, the more you're going to be like,
away from the subject.
I don't remember what point I was trying to make. Okay. I just told you this story to tell you a bigger story. I don't remember the bigger story.
Yeah.
Like, that's happened to me like 10 times podcasting before.
Oh yeah. I mean, that happened with us today. You're just talking about whatever, and we get off on a tangent. And I'm like, oh, what was I saying?
And that happens. Sometimes I just like straight up forget. But honestly, I've correlated that a lot of times to poor sleep.
Oh, you think?
I've noticed my memory and ability to carry on long form conversation is affected if I don't get a good night's sleep. For example, my back's a little tweaked. When I tweaked it Thursday morning, but I still taught 2 classes Thursday. I rolled on when did I roll? Thursday night. And then like 3 rounds. And then I did a private lesson with a guy, but didn't roll Friday morning. And then I did a private core, and I did a private with Jack. But I was just taking a leave and sucking it up, and I just pulled muscle in my back. So it's like,
oh, shoot.
I didn't sleep good last night. The moral of the story, I was able to complete my thought there. But for whatever reason, like, there was a period of time when I started working at the university and I wasn't sleeping very well, and got that lined out. And then, man, honestly, all this negativity from everybody that I know, and then, like, because you can't turn anywhere with any group of people without seeing the division right now. And
yeah.
I can't believe that you don't wear a mask. And it's just like, they're not talking to you. They're telling everybody how to live, Yeah. And it's like, I've been seeing so much of that every day. And honestly, every podcast I do, that topic comes up of like, so what have you been doing since the shutdown? Like, it's just, and two, owning a business and having just recently purchased a $400,000 facility and being pushed out of my previous neighborhood by the city government, and now being forced to close by the state government. Like, I used to would have
a lot of frustration.
Oh yeah, dude. I used to would have called myself like a liberal, like maybe I would vote for Bernie Sanders type shit, after watching Joe Rogan's podcast. But now, dude, I'm an anarchist, bro. I have zero fucking faith in anything that is going on. Like
that's funny. You say that.
No level of government institution is coming through for business owners on any level. The lower and middle class pay all the taxes in this country, and that's bullshit too.
Now you're a historian, not really political science, right?
I could teach American government, but I have my undergraduate degrees in history and political science. That's what the name of my degree is, but I'm not technically a political scientist.
Yeah.
But I can carry on a conversation. I deal with so much political history, collectively all throughout the United States history. But like you get into like Jeff Woods, he gets into like American diplomatic history, and Chris Hausnick gets into state and local government, and like upper level like political thought and stuff like that. But like that's not my branch. I'm just like
because I've had Hausnick on the show before, and we've talked a little bit. But
he's been on my podcast several times. Yeah,
but it's funny that you talk about an anarchist, because you have like two different definitions of, or some people have a couple of different definitions of anarchist. Some people, that's, I don't know, a little bit more tunnel vision, may have one definition for anarchist, but because some people look at government as like, left side or right side or in between, but when they start to talk, they talk like an anarchist. And I'm like, everything you're saying is not like the belief of left or right or in between. It's more like anarchist, and you just want to do what you want.
Exactly, man. It's like, I don't need a government institution to tell me how to build my new building.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need a government institution to tell me that I can have my business open or closed. Like, that's the thing that, and I will say, dude, if there is any sort of a class action lawsuit, even if I don't reap any rewards until I'm 75, but for martial arts, because it's like, dude, our liberties have been eroded. Like, people kind of, and I'm like, whoa, there's no gray area. You wanted to talk about the Constitution all the way up until this shit happened, right? Like that was your big arguing point on everything, and every conversation you have with anybody. It's like our rights as citizens of this country and our civil liberties to pursue property, to pursue happiness, to pursue liberty. Yeah. That has been infringed upon in a way that is unconstitutional. State governments are striking it down. Wisconsin Supreme Court has struck it down. And it's like, I'm not here to argue like people wearing masks and this and that or whatever, but it's like, we do not need government institutions to say you can or cannot build this, you can or cannot do this with your business, and that, or you can or cannot grow this plant without having someone show up to arrest you.
Yeah, like there's a lot of things that went on in this to where I was, some of the things, the thoughts I just keep to myself. I don't post every thought on Facebook. But when they first started calling it a quarantine, and I'm like, why is it a quarantine? Because are they gonna have some place where they put the sick people? Is what I thought at first, and they're like, no, you just need to stay at home. And I was like, but that's, you're not quarantining the people that's sick. You're quarantining everybody. But where did the strategy come from, and how do we know to go to that strategy? Just automatically, because you never planned for the virus to make it here. So how do we have a plan, and how do we know how it spreads, and how do we know all these other details? But yet here we are.
Dude, we used to, George Washington died because somebody tried treating his throat infection by bleeding him. Like the former first president of the United States got killed by some bullshit doctor in the name of science. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? It's like, dude, science is great. I'm not here to refute anything about like the effectiveness. I think, like, I personally have not been wearing a mask at times, but I've gone into Walmart, worn a mask, working out with Dr. Shane, worn a mask.
There's sometimes I wear one, sometimes I don't.
But the thing is like, you can't tell everybody in society you have to wear a mask, and every Karen and social justice warrior on the internet is taking time out of their day to do that. Mayors and stuff like that. But you can't do that. Like you can't tell people how to. That's out of the scope of what we got going on in this country.
I just didn't think people would go to the extremes of like saying you've got to do just like I do. I don't want you to do like you think. I don't think you should have the freedom to not wear a mask, and I don't think you should have the freedom to wear a mask. So we should all be doing one thing. When you say this is your freedom and your liberties, why can't you look at somebody with a mask and be like, okay, I'm accepted of that? But there's also people. There's also people that talk about. I saw so and so wearing a mask going down the road, and I talked about this in my vlog. Had a little speech about it. So and so is wearing a mask when their car and driving down the road, and they're making fun of them. And these people were serious about it. And I'm like, you're bullying. That's bullyish behavior because you're talking about people wearing a mask driving down the road. It's a free country. If I want to wear a mask, drive down the road, I'll do it. So there's no need to poke fun at somebody because you don't know their situation. And it's just like anything else. Like somebody has a bad attitude one day. And I hear a lot of people say this, you don't know what they're going through. So, just kind of deal with it. Be like, well, deal with the person wearing the mask.
I think the biggest argument on that is maybe the person wearing the mask that's driving down the car is actually sick. Yeah. That is the biggest justifiable reason to wear a mask is that you're sick. Now, the asymptomatic side of the virus.
Mm-hmm. And I think some people it's just easier to do as opposed to putting on a mask, getting out of the car. Because I've done it the other day. I just had it around my neck and it was probably looked like it was on. But when I get out of the car, I don't want to have to be fumbling with the mask, before when I start walking. So it's just on. But so
what you're trying to say is you were the dude that's being made fun of in the car.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because I did it a couple of times and I didn't think it was like a big thing. And I started seeing like several people talking about it. I'm like, man, people are they're coming down on people just for wearing a mask driving down the road. And to some, it's funny. That's
just the division in the society right now. It's just so much division.
Mm-hmm. It just adds to it. Yeah. Be like, let me be me and you be you, but we can still smile and we can still talk.
But I want you to be me.
Yeah. Like, we go grocery shopping or whatever. I know there's 3 different occasions in the store. This is like when it first started happening. And a couple of these occasions, I didn't have a mask on. One time I did. But there was ladies in the store that couldn't reach the top shelf, or they were trying to reach like water or things on the bottom shelf, and they couldn't get them, and they asked me to get them for them. And I could have been like the person that was like, "Oh no, I'm not touching nothing, and I'm not getting close to you." But
I know, man.
I helped those people out.
Yeah, well, that's like we saw somebody out on the trail the other day, and like their kid like kind of wanted to pet one of our dogs, and like their parent was like, no, they could have the plague, like basically. But it's like that's the division. Uh-huh. That's all I can do. That's all. Like, I don't like people that create division in society. Like, it's like there is enough division in our history, mm-hmm. and that currently and presently exists, whether that's political, racial, class, income, single parent, whatever, non-traditional parent, gay, straight. It's like there's already enough division, enough factions in society that we're having to work through, and that's what I think that honestly that this pandemic has just sort of really shined a lot of light on all of that, really amplified the underlying stuff.
I think it amplified it. And it's just taking like Arkansas history, talking about I took that last semester, talking about different political parties and things that went on in the state. And I don't know if a lot of people think about it when they say it, but they throw around liberal, conservative, and right and left, and Democrat and Republican. But I just wonder if they knew they like actually switched values as time went on from like early 1800s to now. It's like it's not even the same as what it was, hundreds of years ago.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But Arkansas is fascinating. It really is. I mean, I teach that class that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, and I had the privilege to, and still get to talk to him, Dr. DeBlack, one of the authors of the textbook that you would have used for the course. He is, he's a mentor to me. He really helped me out. I've talked to him since we transitioned online.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him. I talked to him right before that. I went to Conway, had some lunch with him. He gave me some PowerPoints and some stuff and a couple books. But man, he helps me out big time with teaching that class. He's retired now. He just retired like last year. So it's awesome getting to basically access him and use him as a resource. Yeah, dude, because I'll text him something and he immediately calls me. He's like, here's this. Have you been showing him that? What about this? Did you look at that? Have you read this? Mm-hmm. And it is great. So
yeah, and it's like I know you as a professor and my sister as a professor. It's like teachers and professors now are into like more truth seeking and revealing things in the history that people didn't talk about before. Whereas when I was young and coming up, it was just the opposite. It's like you thought it was all about Columbus. And there was nobody here when he came here, and then the colonization started. It was like that's kind of what you thought, or maybe I'm wrong and I just didn't learn it right.
Yeah, dude, Columbus is oh man, that story. Like, and two, what's funny is like there was somebody on my podcast like a year and a half ago. Younger person, but an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And I was telling this Columbus story about like how he had given this slave girl, this native, to one of the captains of a ship that was in their fleet. And that dude was basically raping. He was raping her and mm-hmm. talking about it in his diary. And he was like, "Oh, I got this gift from the admiral. The admiral would be Columbus." And like I just read this primary source and like showed it to my class and like had done the research on it. And I brought this story up just like I am right now. Mm-hmm. And then the person goes, "Oh, I think that's been disproved." And I was like, "No, it fucking hasn't. Columbus was an asshole, dude. That dude was an asshole. Like he enslaved and people were raped at his
he was a funded pirate."
Yeah, that is a great way of talking about it.
Yeah, this it's crazy the things that come about. I can't remember where it was, but I heard a video or something about when he came over here, he saw some people, or maybe it wasn't here, maybe it was actually Mexico where he stopped, but he saw some people kicking around a ball, and I think it was like a game to him, and he took the game back to Europe, and they think that's where soccer came from. And
okay, so check this out. This is like, I mean, it's changed a lot because of the ingredients that are used or whatever, but where does pizza come from?
Yeah, that's supposed to be Italian, I thought.
Yeah, and I've heard some people say that they thought that it might have came from like Greece to Italy or something because of like the Greeks kind of were first, mm-hmm. And then Rome rises up and becomes an empire over time. But the Greek Empire was really first, mm-hmm. and that's like the order I teach them in, But it was actually Marco Polo brought that shit back to Italy from China.
Really?
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Because you go from like what America knows Chinese food from is eating out of a box as opposed to like eating off a dough and without chopsticks.
Some ingredients that comes on like a pizza, I forget what they are, that you can't get in China. That like they do it differently in China, but like it just evolved. You know, like that's another facet, like the history of food.
Yeah.
That's something one of the classes I took in college talked about civilization changing, and then like as it changed, and kind of like the Columbian Exchange, you know, but like with everything, like and in between these two time periods, that's when we found the coffee bean in Ethiopia. Yeah, it's stuff like that.
Yeah, that is interesting. I never thought about the food migration
like
of
potatoes.
Food,
a lot of people think potatoes are from Europe or Ireland. They're actually from South America.
And you always think, look at South America as like the coffee bean.
Yeah, Ethiopia on coffee bean, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah. Well, dude, I had actually got to bounce off here, man. I think I had somebody just pull up. My dog has alarmed me. I don't think it's the mailman.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we're gonna wrap it up anyway.
Well, bro, it was great. It was great talking to you, man.
Yeah. You want to throw a couple of plugs out?
You know, I got some good episodes coming out on my podcast. Justin Rader, Kevin Williams. But if people want to check it out, facebook.com/Unraveled. You can follow or like the page there. Or we're on YouTube, Stitcher, Podbean, Apple Podcast, all that. Somebody can email me, wilson@uaccm.edu. I'm getting a website built for the podcast right now. So.
Oh, cool. And you want to get your gym?
Forza Martial Arts and Fitness, Russellville, ForzaMMA.com. People come see us, 301 Reasoner Lane in Russellville, if they want to stop by and cross train or get punched in the face or something.
Oh, yeah, have some fun.
Yeah.
All right, well, I appreciate it, man.
All right, bro. Good talking to you.
All right, I'll get with you soon.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Later.